The Veth technician's report was straightforward. The human was dead. The human disagreed. Sarath had processed 17 crash recoveries in 8 years of station service. The protocol was fixed. Board the wreck. Assess biological status. Extract or bag depending on result. Simple math. A creature's vital indices either met the minimum threshold for continued function, or they did not. The human's did not. Her cardiac rhythm was arrhythmic. Her core temperature had dropped 2.3 degrees below her species' baseline, and the atmospheric seal on her suit had failed at the left shoulder, which meant she had been breathing trace particulates for however long it had taken the rescue skiff to reach her. By every metric Sarath had been trained to apply, the human was an inoperative biological unit. Then the inoperative biological unit looked up at him and said, "Hand me that conduit." Sarath stood in the wreckage of the survey pod hull, peeled back along the port side like something had taken a bite. Consoles dark, the smell of burned insulation mixing with whatever atmosphere was leaking from the compromised suit, and processed the request for 1.3 seconds before concluding he had misheard the translator. "You are injured," he said. "We are here to extract you." "I know." She was sitting propped against the navigator's console, one hand pressed to her side where the suit's impact foam had deployed and then partially failed. Her face was a map of burst capillaries. She was using her other hand to work at something in the open panel beneath the console. "The data core is intact, but the nav array is scrambled. If I don't pull the logs before the secondary power cell goes, the mission profile is gone." So, she looked at him again. Her eyes were steady. "Conduit. Bent one. On the floor behind you." Sarath's secondary survey team member, a young Veth named Parath, made a sound that in their language translated roughly as "this does not follow." Sarath understood the sentiment entirely. He picked up the conduit anyway. She took it without looking, inserted one end into the panel, and began doing something that his technical training was insufficient to parse. The nav console flickered. "Your shoulder seal is compromised," Sarath said. "Yep. You have been breathing particulate matter for an estimated 40 minutes. Longer, probably. The seal went when I hit the second debris field." She twisted the conduit. Something clicked. "I've got maybe 3 minutes on the secondary cell. Stop talking to me for 3 minutes." Parath's sound again. "This does not follow." Louder. Sarath watched the human work. Her hands moved with a precision that seemed inconsistent with her physiological state. The arrhythmia should have impaired her fine motor function. He logged this discrepancy and said nothing, because she had asked for 3 minutes, and he found, without entirely understanding why, that he was going to give them to her. The nav console came fully online at the 2-minute 40 mark. She pulled the data core, held it up briefly, a small gesture, almost private, like she was showing it to someone who wasn't there, and then tucked it into her suit's inner pocket. "Okay," she said. "Now you can extract me." She required 2 of them to stand. She did not complain about this. She did not complain when Sarath attached an emergency seal patch over her shoulder breech, or when Parath administered the basic analgesic that would take the edge off the rib fractures the scanner had found. She walked to the skiff under her own power, which was not something the protocol had a category for. When Sarath filed his after-action report that evening, he wrote, "Biological unit recovered. Non-compliant with standard extraction procedure. Mission data preserved. Status. Operational." He stared at the word. Times. Operational times for a long time. It was technically accurate. It did not feel sufficient. He did not know what word would. She was still holding the conduit when they lifted off. The Veth station had 17 words for inoperative. None of them applied. The human, her name was Johal, engineer 2nd class, assigned to a long-range geological survey that had been reduced by 1 pod and 1 crew member in the debris field, spent the first 6 hours on the station in the medical bay. She spent them arguing with the attending physician about whether she was cleared for duty, losing the argument, and then working anyway from the bed, her personal tablet propped on her knees. The salvaged data core plugged into an adapter Sarath had found for her because the Veth standard ports were the wrong size, and she had asked very politely, and he was, apparently, susceptible to very polite requests delivered by people who should be sedated. He checked on her at hour 7. She was not in the medical bay. He found her in the engineering annex on subdeck 4, which was not a space humans were typically permitted to access unescorted, seated cross-legged on the floor with 3 Veth diagnostic relays open in front of her, and her suit's busted communications array in pieces beside them. "How did you get in here?" he asked. Door was open. She looked up. The capillary damage on her face had moved through the purple phase and was now settling into something greenish-yellow. "I need to show you something in this data. You need to be in the medical bay." I was. "I'm fine. Come look at this." He came and looked. The data core from the survey pod was displaying a geological survey overlaid with a thermal imaging grid. The survey had been mapping the approaches to depth 7, a Veth deep core mining installation operating on the 3rd moon of Yethera. The thermal grid was showing something that made the calculation centers of Sarath's cognition run very fast and arrive at a conclusion that he did not want to arrive at. "This is a cascading resonance failure," he said. "In the outer strata, yeah. About 4 kilometers down from the primary installation. The survey flagged it as a potential geological event in 6 to 10 months. But..." She pulled up a secondary data layer. "That's the automated projection. I've been running the numbers with the actual extraction data from the last 3 weeks, and the timetable is off." "Off how?" "Not 6 to 10 months, 6 to 10 days, maybe less." Sarath processed this. 340 Veth workers were currently operating in and around depth. 7. Evacuation of a deep core installation was a logistical operation requiring a minimum of 11 hours under ideal conditions. "I need to get this to Station Command," he said. "Already tried. The data core's authentication codes are flagged as provisional survey grade, not certified. The automated system rejected my transmission." She looked at him levelly. 10 round. The persimmons. The 10 round on the bro. Your station's intake protocol requires certified geological data from a licensed Veth surveyor before it will route an emergency flag to command. I'm not a Veth surveyor. I'm a human engineer with what looks like a provisional data tag and 2 broken ribs. The protocol was, Sarath thought, insane. He had filled out enough intake forms to know that the protocol was always insane and that pointing this out achieved nothing. I can route it manually. It will take time. How much time? 4 hours, minimum. The authorization chain has 7 steps. She made a sound he was beginning to recognize as her version of this does not follow. Then she looked back at the diagnostic relays in front of her and picked up the bent conduit, which was apparently a tool she carried everywhere now. What are you doing? He said. Your diagnostic relays run on the same base architecture as the survey array. Different interface, same data language. She inserted the conduit into a port on the relay with the same precise motion he had watched in the crashed pod. If I can bridge the authentication layer using the relay's certified system ID, I can repackage the data under your station's own geological monitoring flag. It'll route as internal data, not external submission. Should bypass the intake protocol entirely. Sarath considered pointing out that this was technically unauthorized access to station systems. He considered it for approximately 0.8 seconds. Will it work? Talking through it now. She started speaking rapidly. Not to him, he realized, but to herself, narrating the problem as she went. This was a behavior he had observed twice already and had not been able to categorize. Veth did not speak aloud while computing. Thinking was internal. Verbalizing an incomplete computation was, in Veth cognitive architecture, a sign of processing error. But she did not appear to be experiencing processing error. If anything, the speaking seemed to be part of the thinking. Each sentence a step in a staircase. each word testing the surface before she put her weight on it. He found himself listening as she worked, following the logic. "The relay's maintenance logs," she said, half to herself. "Your system archives them, but doesn't read them. Nobody reads maintenance logs." A pause. A twist of the conduit. "I always read maintenance logs." Another pause, longer. Then, there it is. The diagnostic relay lit up. The data from the Survey Corps reassembled itself under the relay's certified authentication header and routed cleanly into the station's geological monitoring system, which immediately flagged it as Priority 1. Sarath's communication implant chimed. "Station command. Forwarding an emergency geological alert." "That's the evacuation signal going to depth 7, she said. She was already putting the relays back together, returning them to their original state. "They've got maybe 6 days. Probably a bit more if the extraction team is conservative with the lower strata." She looked at him. "They need to start moving now." "They will." He was already composing the response to command. "They will start now." "Good." She stood, slowly, one hand bracing on the wall. The rib fractures were in her expression, if you knew where to look, a careful management of breath, a slight forward lean. "I need a ship." He looked at her. "To get the manual shutdown hardware to depth 7, she said. "The resonance failure is going to accelerate once the evacuation starts disturbing the lower strata. You need someone to go in with a manual suppression rig and buy the evacuation team extra time. Your geological team is good, but they're not going to find a volunteer for that run." She met his eyes. "I will." Sarath thought about the 17 Veth words for inoperative. He thought about her vital indices in the crashed pod. He thought about the conduit, which she was still holding. "I'll find you a ship," he said. They gave her the ship because no Veth pilot would fly those odds, and also because she had already started walking toward the docking bay. Sarath had put this to the station flight coordinator in the most logical terms he could manage, that the human was volunteering, that no Veth crew had stepped forward, that the depth 7 evacuation success probability increased by 34% with the manual suppression run completed, that the run's survival probability for the pilot was 61% under current conditions and falling as the resonance failure progressed. The coordinator had approved the requisition in the time it took Johal to reach Docking Bay 7. She had already started the pre-flight checklist when he boarded the courier. "You don't have to come," she said, not looking up from the unfamiliar panel. "I know the ship's systems," he said. "You don't. I'll figure it out." A pause. "It'd be faster with you." "Yes." He strapped in. She was already talking, narrating the controls, learning them aloud, naming each system as she touched it. The courier was a Veth design, not built for human hands, and he watched her adapt to the interface with a focused attention that reminded him of the way she had worked in the wrecked pod. No hesitation, no complaint, just the next step, and then the next one. By the time they cleared the station's docking envelope, she had the drives balanced, and the nav system routing for Yathara's third moon. The debris field from the partial resonance collapse was visible on approach. The outer strata of the moon's crust had already begun to shift, and 2 of depth 7's 3 surface access shafts had registered seismic deformation. The primary docking port read as compromised. "I can't dock," she said. It was a statement, not a complaint. "No." She pulled up the installation schematics he had loaded from the station archive. Scanned them for 11 seconds. "Secondary equipment, lock on the north face. It's rated for EV-A access. Has it deformed?" He checked the telemetry. 3 degrees of warp, within tolerance for a manual seal. "Okay." She was already standing, moving toward the equipment locker. "I need a suit. Show me which one fits closest." The EVA approach was manual. She took the maneuvering unit from him, after he demonstrated the controls once, and managed the approach herself. The suppression rig tethered behind her, the courier holding position 40 meters off the north face. The lock was warped, but the manual seal held. She was inside, in 9 minutes. He monitored from the courier, tracking her biosigns and the installation sensor data simultaneously. He could hear her on the comm, still narrating the corridor layout as she moved through it, the suppression rig's assembly steps, the reactor architecture. She was working from a schematic she'd memorized during the transit. She sounded the same as she had in the engineering annex. Same cadence, same flat focus. The lower reactor corridor had flooded with coolant from a fractured line. She reported this as a fact and kept moving. Suit integrity is at 22%, he said. I know. I can see the gauge. The coolant is corrosive to the suit material. I know. How long do I have at current exposure rate? He ran the calculation. 11 minutes before, integrity drops below safe threshold. That's enough. It was, by 4 minutes. He heard the reactor systems go cold on the installation sensors. Not an explosion, not a failure cascade, but a controlled shutdown, sequence by sequence. The way you shut a reactor down when you had the manual override and knew exactly what you were doing and had memorized the schematic on the flight over. The resonance readings flatlined. The strata stopped moving. The evacuation team had 3 extra days. Her suit integrity was at 14% when the depth. 7 workers found her sitting in the flooded corridor, water up to her waist, the cold of it soaking through the compromised suit material. They extracted her quickly and with considerable urgency. She let them, which he had come to understand was the closest she came to compliance. When they carried her out, she was holding the bent conduit. He had watched her pick it up from the courier's equipment bay before the EVA, transferring it from suit pocket to suit pocket. He had not asked. He had not asked now, as they loaded her onto the evacuation transport, and she held it in one hand against her chest. This useless piece of scrap from a wrecked ship that had served no function in any of this except to be carried. He filed his after-action report on the transit back to the station. He wrote, Engineer Johal, human, seconded to depth. 7 emergency response. Manual suppression run completed successfully. Depth. 7 evacuation proceeds on schedule. Casualties. 0. He paused at the end of the report, where the standard field asked for observer notes. He wrote, She kept a broken piece of her broken ship. I have observed this across 3 separate operations. The object has no technical function. I do not know why she keeps it. I have begun to think this is the wrong question. I think it matters. I do not yet have the framework to say how. He submitted the report. Through the transport's small viewport, the third moon of Yathara turned slowly in the dark. Its surface quiet now. The deep machinery stilled. 340 workers were alive on the transports around them. The human was asleep in the medical bay, with a piece of bent conduit in her hand. He sat with that fact for a long time. It did not get simpler. He was starting to think it wasn't supposed to.